Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 107 with Porter Rappleye from Pronto. So this episode is exploring the human side of digital learning and ways that we can help facilitate that for students and faculty, just creating learning environments that are more dynamic and engaging and allow for everyone just to communicate with each other easier. So been a big fan of Pronto since last year when I initially kind of discovered it at a conference, and I'll speak a little bit about that and learn more about Pronto, the work that they do, Porter's journey, and just kind of holistically about all the work that's happening right now in digital student engagement. So super great episode. Appreciate Porter's time. So a couple of quick reminders. So we will be ending this season of the podcast on December 2nd. That'll be the final episode, and we will be doing a Q&A for that episode. So I will be posting on social media, soliciting questions, but yeah, just hope to get some great stuff from folks to make that a really cool, unique episode. Also, there's another sale going on our merch store. Find a link to that in the show notes for this episode, but there's going to be a bunch of great sales going on through the end of this year, and there's another one happening if you listen to this one as of it posting on November 4th through the end of this week. So definitely go check that out. Yeah, so I think those are all the housekeeping things that I wanted to mention here for this week, but just appreciate everybody's support as always. So after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 107 with Porter Rappleye. This episode is sponsored by Degree.me, a one-stop college research tool for students. If you work for a college or university, you'll want to learn all about their ability to connect you with the right students at a budget-friendly price. To find out more, please visit degree.me/HEG. Yeah, I'm so excited for today's episode to talk about a tool that I got turned on to a year ago, got a great demo from folks from your team. And it's just something that I'm so grateful for the opportunity to give some space to talk through and highlight here on the podcast. So, Porter, thank you so much for taking time out for the show. We will get into everything and start out as we always do. If you want to introduce yourself and give a little overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, no problem, Dustin. Thanks for thinking of us. I'm excited to be on here. My professional journey isn't an elaborate one. It's a pretty straightforward one with a little bit of luck that got me into the situation where I am today. So I got my undergrad from Weber State University, which is in just north of Salt Lake City, about 30 minutes north of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I studied business with an emphasis in marketing. And after school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I just sort of took the first job offer that came about, which happened to be it was a sales job down in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was working for an industry that had absolutely nothing to do with higher education. It was I was selling industrial manufacturing equipment to warehouses, and I was there for about 4 years. And I didn't love the industry that I was working in. I wasn't passionate about the products that I was selling. And it got me just really sort of reevaluating what I wanted to do. Ultimately, I knew I wanted to go back to school and further my education. And then I had also always had interest in working in some capacity with teaching and learning in some capacity. And so I had heard about a company called Instructure, who you probably know as Canvas. Mm-hmm. You're all familiar with Instructure, I'm sure. And I decided to move back to Utah and get my master's in business. And while working on my master's, I started exploring Instructure and Canvas. This was back in 2014, I want to say. And so they were just starting to really make some leeway in the higher ed space. And they were obviously pretty well known in Salt Lake area at the time. And so I started exploring them, and then ultimately came over, and I was working for Instructure for about 3 years while I was getting my MBA. Finished my MBA while I was still there. And while I was there, I got introduced to Pronto, and Pronto was I'll get into more detail here in a minute, but they were building a communication tool, or they had just built like a very basic version of what it is today. And they were wanting to break into higher education, and they wanted somebody to come over and help with those efforts. And so I happened to know somebody who was one of the founders at Pronto, and he connected the two of us, and we started working together. And what they were looking for was very much in line with what the schools I was working with while I was at Instructure were asking for on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story short, we decided that it was a good fit. I came over. I've been here for about 3 years now. And it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's always cool to hear, obviously, just unique journeys. And I think just the kind of existential searching that you kind of went through to find what kind of resonated more with you. And I know, Pronto is doing really cool work. And I know, there's sort of the, because I don't know why my brain just kind of thought of this, because Instructure and obviously Canvas being, most people know them for just this kind of behemoth in the higher ed world. A lot of people have interacted with it in some way. And Pronto kind of plays very nicely with Canvas and just sort of, that integration. That was just sort of like a natural progression from there, but just like really now kind of building upon the experience that you had there to continue the work with Pronto. So before we get too far, like just so people understand, if you want to explain briefly about what Pronto does, like the tool and the platform and everything, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure. So it's really not a whole lot different of a tool than probably the different communication tools that you and your audience are familiar with. So think of the different social media chat tools. I mean, you can even think of things like Facebook Messenger or Slack or WhatsApp or GroupMe, all these different types of communication tools. But the difference is Pronto was built for education, and it integrates directly inside of the LMS. So Canvas, for example, we integrate with all the major LMSs, but since I came from Canvas, I'm going to probably default to talk about them. But Canvas, for example, so if you're inside of the LMS Canvas, there's lots of different sort of disconnected and disjointed ways to communicate through the LMS. You've got a discussions tool inside of there. There's even a chat tool built inside of Canvas, but it's to be kind to my former employer, I won't get into too much detail, but it's very, very antiquated, to say the least. There's like an announcement feature in there. There's all these different communication aspects to the tool, but none of them are built in a way that students actually like to use. I mean, you think of a student's experience outside of the classroom communicating with individuals. They never go through these formal communication channels like you do inside of the LMS. And so what we've done is we've taken what feels very familiar to the way students like to and prefer to communicate with each other, and now we've just plugged it right into the LMS. And so Pronto is a mobile first communication app. So we work on Apple and Android devices, but we also plug right inside of the LMS. So if you're on the desktop inside of Canvas, you basically see almost like a GChat little chat box at the bottom right, where you can participate in discussions with your classroom, with your teacher, with your classmates. Maybe it's a study group that you're working on. And the nice thing about it is, as you navigate to different areas within Canvas, that chat experience carries over with you. It doesn't go away. So like if I'm in a discussion forum inside of Canvas, I may be replying to a certain topic, but the second I leave the discussions page, that discussion goes away. And then a lot of times with the different chat functionality inside of the LMSs, you only see up to the point of where you join the conversation. Pronto, it's a continuous conversation that carries both before and after you leave. And as you go and revisit the chat tool, you're able to view the conversations that took place before you joined. The other really nice thing about it is Pronto automatically syncs all of your courses and all of your groups just by virtue of logging into Pronto. So for example, if I'm a student and I log into the Pronto mobile app, and let's say I'm taking four courses at my school, I am going to see a list of those 4 courses listed out with all of my classmates, all of my teachers. Maybe there's a TA inside of all of them. I'm connected with them on day one without having to share my personal information, without having to search for any classmates or my teachers. And in addition to that, if I'm inside of any groups within the LMS, so let's say my teachers added me into a study group or a group project, those groups will automatically be created through the Canvas integration for me to be able to start chatting with my groups and things like that. So yeah, I know that was really long-winded, but essentially it's a 21st century way of chatting with your class and with your teachers.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think it was very comprehensive, so I appreciate that, because I think my brain just makes sense in the sense of like it being like essentially Slack, but kind of just like natively and dynamically embedded into the LMS. Because I think, highlighting that it's like, well, there are ways to do many of these things in an LMS like Canvas, but yeah, it's kind of very disjointed or just not very intuitive. And often, students do not enjoy utilizing those things. But the idea of there having, different channels, just kind of different, streams of conversations for these groups and courses and things that any particular student is a part of, it just reflects in a way, like you said, that is so kind of paralleled and mirrored on any of those number of other platforms that people use to connect. So I know I was just so impressed when I saw it for the first time, because it does solve for that, being kind of just omnipresent, being, just kind of more dynamic and natively embedded versus having to like click through, and try to just navigate the maze of any particular LMS to find these things. So certainly major kudos to you and yours there at Pronto. It's just it's because it's like simple in theory, but so kind of and I feel like this will be the word that I keep saying, just so dynamic in practice, just to allow for these conversations just to kind of just happen more organically.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the really interesting things is a lot of times when you talk to professors, sometimes these professors are not overly tech savvy, and they start getting intimidated when you say things like, oh yeah, real-time engagement platforms and mobile first. And they start thinking, oh my goodness, are my students going to be chatting with me at all hours of the night, and I'm not going to have any free time, and my phone's just going to be buzzing 24/7? But what we found is that it's actually decreasing the amount of communication time that teachers are having to spend communicating with their students. And the reason why is there's so much more peer-to-peer learning that takes place. A student, for example, if a student without having Pronto has a question about anything, maybe it's an upcoming exam, probably what the student is going to do, again, thinking if you don't have Pronto, they're going to shoot an email to their teacher and ask a question. Hey, I've got a question about this specific topic. It's probably going to be a pretty formal email that comes over because email is typically treated as a pretty formal environment. The teacher will maybe see the email right away, but more than likely not. The teacher will probably see it later on. And then when the teacher responds to it, again, it's going to be sort of this formal, long explanation. With Pronto, it's so much less formal. And so the same scenario, a student needs to ask a question about the upcoming exam. They go into Pronto, the classroom discussion, and they quickly post, hey, I've got a question about this specific topic. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? Now, the teacher doesn't have to be the one to respond to that question, whereas normally they're having to reply on this long email. The teacher may be there as sort of like a monitor of the discussion forum, and they may see the question come in but not answer right away and wait for a student to chime in and answer the question and make sure that correct information is being shared. But the amount of time that the teacher's actually having to spend responding, we've noticed, has gone down significantly, which opens up a lot of free time for the teacher.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because that's definitely like a philosophy I have is like, if you have a quick question, like just ask it to me. And if I can give you a quick response that like saves you a bunch of time or just like frustration or confusion or having to delay, doing something, just having that ability to be more responsive. And it's definitely like, for those things, because I think, like you said, that's going to be something that comes up so frequently. Is just, a student asking a faculty some sort of question that's going to take probably 5 minutes or less for them to, solve the student's problem, and just allowing for, something that's like a little bit more, like is it mobile first, or just, just, I don't know, like versus having to like go through any of the other communication platforms on an LMS or, via email, where just everything else is just going to be like, drowning out, just a quick student question. Just having people go through chat could be, just better served there.
Yeah, exactly.
And, well, no, yeah. And I mean, and it's also just like, there's the whole just sort of like social aspect to it, I think too, that just allows for, students to connect with each other and, just build kind of camaraderie and community. And certainly, faculty and staff can be, a part of these things as well. Cause I think I see a lot of use case for like, just like advisors or like success coaches or something, to like be in this platform and just helping to facilitate, the sharing of like helpful resources, or just sort of like, just understanding kind of like what's, on students' minds, or what's, what's being talked about, and those sort of things. But, because I could just see like the role of like a moderator, maybe, like just like somebody who's in there to just kind of like, be supportive of, jumping in to answer a question that a student might have, to just, be plugged in and be helpful, and, just not miss anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that, you all have been at this work for some time, but certainly, as with many ed tech platforms and organizations and things, I'm sure the ongoing pandemic has reshaped your work in some fundamental ways. So I'm just curious, how this current climate has shaped the work of your team to maybe, do some completely new things that you weren't predicting that you might need to do, or accelerate other things that you were working on. I'm just curious what's maybe come up over these past several months.
Yeah, it's been interesting because, we are constantly preaching remote learning. Use Pronto because it will help you with. You don't have to be in the classroom. You can be doing stuff from your house and still be just as effective. But we weren't actually practicing what we were preaching at the time, right? Because our CEO, he was kind of a butts in the seat type of person, where it's, I want you guys in the office and I want you working face to face and yada yada. Yet we were selling this digital engagement platform, and so when COVID hit, it was sort of like, okay, put your money where your mouth is. Let's see if this actually works. And Zach, our CEO, I think he was a little nervous about everybody going remote and staying productive and staying effective in their respective jobs. And so everybody went remote, back in March when COVID hit, and we're still remote today. And quite honestly, we have not skipped a beat, and we use Pronto as our primary communication tool, both internally and sometimes externally, as we're meeting with clients outside of our organization. And it's really changed Zach's perspective on remote learning. And as a matter of fact, he's come out and said, you know what, like, I was not expecting us to be this productive working remote. And so now he's totally shifted, where he's saying, even when coronavirus is completely gone, we are going to move to a sort of a permanent hybrid learning, or I guess working environment, where I may have you come into the office once or twice a week or something like that, just for camaraderie and seeing face to face and whatnot. But by and large, we're going to be remote moving forward. And so it was really eye-opening for us and really cool for us to, we've been talking about how Pronto helps you do that, but we hadn't actually practiced it. But now that we're practicing it 100%, it's sort of like confirmation that what we are saying actually works, because we do it every day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, it's one of those things, I mean, I can understand where it's just like, oh, I've got to like, see it to believe it. Like it just seems like such a foreign concept, really, just be like, I mean, just a completely remote team, like nobody's in person, like no. Exactly. And it's like, then you see it and it's like, oh, okay, all right, now I get it. And I mean, I definitely agree too. I think there's definitely a lot of value for kind of that hybrid model for, an organization, employees to be sort of taking the best of both worlds and, finding those times, whether it is on a weekly, monthly, basis or like a quarterly basis. Cause I know like, in my role, we do, before all this, we did tend to try to get our small team together and larger teams or the whole company together kind of intermittently, like on a quarterly basis, at least, sometimes just for kind of, fun for its own sake, or just some fun and, work and those sort of things. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely does help to build bonds that way. But, day to day, there can be space, especially depending on what any individual person has going on. And then, I mean, definitely like the sort of higher levels, like once you are a completely remote organization or a mostly remote organization, and just being able to like, recruit and retain talent, and all that sort of thing. But it's also just like, maybe we'll get there. You don't want to like rush somebody into it. It's definitely a big paradigm shift. But, well, I guess something to clarify too, because I know you said that you've been, your team is actually using platform to communicate with each other. And I know what sort of helped inspire me to reach out to talk through with you all on the show here recently was seeing that you all have built out a like video chat platform that you can just like pull up and like connect with somebody, just on demand. So I'm curious because, again, I'm assuming you all are using this to communicate with each other. Was it sort of like, oh, can we build this for us? And then realizing like, oh, wait, well, this would be useful for everybody. Like, I guess sort of like what the genesis of that idea was like, and just talking through, just the functionality of that tool a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, the feature that you're referring to is called Pronto Meetings. And it's just like you mentioned, it's a video streaming functionality type of a tool. So sort of like a conferencing tool where you can go face to face with an individual or with a group of, right now we support up to 20 people being able to be live at the same time, and then up to 400 people being able to watch. Our organization's a lot smaller than 400, so we never quite get to that point. But some like lecture style classrooms, they're really big, and so it helps for those types of classes. But as far as sort of why we built this, we actually have had a video. We called it live streaming. We've had live streaming around for a long time. But it was a pretty basic video live streaming type of a tool. So you could basically almost think of like FaceTime on the iPhone. It felt like FaceTime, but you could have multiple people in there. And it was enough to satisfy what most teachers and most students were looking for. So they were looking for, a video tool for office hours and maybe for small group projects and things like that. But what sort of inspired meetings to be built, which is just a far more robust version of our original live streaming tool, was just the feedback that we were getting from schools. Since COVID hit, I don't remember what our actual percentage of an increase is, but when COVID hit and the schools that were using Pronto, we noticed looking at the data that our video functionality had it was something like 5,000% increase in usage. Like, I don't remember what the numbers are. I'll have to look into that and I can maybe get back with you on that, but some crazy number where, before everybody was using tools like Zoom and I think, most schools typically are, but for very informal type of scenarios where, hey, a student just has a quick question, boom, I can go live inside of Pronto because I'm already chatting with that person. Or I'm a student working on a group project and I'm chatting with my classmates. This would be better if we could just quickly go live. I don't have to send out a calendar invite. I don't have to include a link. I don't have to have anybody like enter a passcode. It's literally one tap of a button in the middle of us chatting back and forth. Boom, we're live and we're chatting with each other. And so we saw that had gone up so incredibly high that we were like, man, maybe we should spend a little more resources to build this out. And then we basically just worked with a lot of our schools that are using Pronto to give feedback on, hey, what would you want if we were to make this more robust? What features would you want? What do you not want? And we took all of that into consideration. And then we have a phenomenal product team over here. And they they knocked out basically what meetings is today in about 3 months. And so it's a fairly, basic conferencing tool if you think of it in comparison with like a Zoom or a WebEx or things like that. But it's just such a more simple tool to use. And they did an awesome job. And it's the feedback that we've gotten so far has been incredible.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, and I think there's something to be said for like simple and lean platforms, because I think yeah, there's just always that temptation to keep cramming in like more functionality, and
Yeah.
there certainly can be some utility there, but it just ends up being like really clunky or crammed or just kind of sluggish. And I'll give a shout out because I've been using it for several months now, because I record a lot of podcast episodes now on a platform called Zencaster, which is a super lean audio only platform, which we're on right now. And it's just the idea that like it just does the few things I need it to. Like I don't need anything too complicated. So there's definitely just such importance for that. And I feel like even still, because obviously so many institutions like have gotten like institutional Zoom licenses, and it's super helpful for faculty and staff to have all the functionality that they need to do webinars and different things. But it's almost like in tandem with that, just it being like so like right there on demand, jump, and like you said, like that also it's sort of like a yes and versus like an either or thing, I guess, so I think just the way that you framed it is just like just that ability to do it and not have to like kind of fumble your way towards having a conversation virtually, face to face over video call. It's just so important, and really will continue to be with online learning. So I feel like I've kind of been like hyping you up and stuff, and obviously you know your work better than I do, but I just love it so much. But for you, and in the way that maybe you're talking about it with institutional partners and everything like that, to you, like what resonates about making this work so impactful for students? Because I feel like I kind of get it, but I'd love to hear kind of how it resonates for you.
I think most people understand that the more a student is engaged with each other, with their teachers, their classmates, the higher chance that that student has with having a good experience, and then ultimately completing and being successful in that course. And so for me, what's been really, really impactful seeing is we've gotten such cool feedback from teachers and from students about how Pronto is literally changing their students' lives. Because when everybody went remote, that everybody probably in the entire world was going through some pretty difficult things, like emotionally and physically, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And what has been the coolest thing for me to see is how Pronto has helped, even during this remote environment, add the human element back into the class. I had one teacher who sent me this long email. It was a school in California that I was working with, and he sent me this long email about how Pronto has really, really helped during this remote environment. And one particular story that he shared was with a young lady who was taking his course. And when COVID first hit, you remember how crazy the stores were. Everybody just went and just wiped them clean, right? There was, everything. The toilet paper was gone.
Right.
Well, this young lady, she was a new mother, and she had a brand new baby. And one of the things that got wiped clean was baby formula. Mm-hmm. Everybody was like, oh my goodness, like I need to go and just stock up. And so she wasn't able to feed her baby. And so she, because Pronto had become this place where the classmates would just go in and just like support each other and share information back and forth. Somehow it came up that this student wasn't able to get her hands on baby formula. And then the teacher said instantly, within 3 minutes of her sharing that information, there were dozens of messages, supporting her. But not only that, somebody had reached out and asked her what grocery store are you closest to? And he had figured out, somewhere where there was baby formula. And he actually went on, purchased formula for her, sent her an address and said, there's baby formula waiting for you at this location. Go pick it up.
Mm.
So it was it added such a human element to this difficult environment. And that for him, he said, Pronto has been fantastic for, the engaging deeply with content and allowing people to discuss, class material. But he says, what's been more important to me that I've noticed is Pronto has added such a human element to the classroom. And that was just one of the examples that he shared. He actually went on to share several, but that I think is the most impactful part of Pronto, or side of Pronto, within the classroom is sort of the human element that it adds.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's powerful and certainly resonates with me as a relatively new parent. Just how meaningful that would be to see people show up in that way. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously people just have the willingness to help when they can, and, being able to give kind of modalities for them to connect and certainly, build the rapport in the community prior to, any of these times where it actually might be needed is just like, so valuable and so important. And, it makes me think of my next question, which I've been asking a lot of people, and I'd be very curious to see how you take it, because I think, a lot of this was accelerated. A lot of these efforts into digital community building were accelerated by everyone quarantining, all institutions going remote learning. So I know that there's going to be some people out there that are like, well, we're only doing this because we have to, or like, we made this investment, but we may not be able to do it long term, or, this tool was free, but once we have to start paying for it, we're not going to use it or something. So in your mind, like, what are your thoughts on like, making sure that institutions and faculty and staff and, just all across the board, like all these strides that we're making right now in digital community building, how do these things like stick and continue, after everybody comes back to campus? Because again, there may just even be like, it's still there, but it kind of has fallen off in terms of, the activity or something. So what are your thoughts on that? I don't know if that's something that's kind of come up on your end, but I feel like I'm thinking about it all the time, just because I hope everybody like sticks with this. Like these things are so valuable, whether it's for online students or commuter students or adult learners, any of these things, these platforms are so impactful. So, the idea of consistency and follow through, once everything gets back to quote unquote normal, what are your thoughts on kind of that follow through with these different digital community building efforts?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? How do we get people to keep using Pronto after life gets back to normal? And honestly, I don't see the demand for a lot of the digital learning tools going away anytime soon. And that's mostly been based off of what I hear from schools. Like you said, COVID, all it really did was expedite the demand for the tools that they knew they already wanted. Every school that I had worked with prior to COVID hitting, there's always a group of individuals. They're usually like in the ed tech learning department, or they're in the distance ed department, or whatever it might be. And there's usually like a group of really innovative teachers that sort of fit into this category. But it's not like when COVID hit, all of a sudden, these teachers were now saying, oh, I want these types of tools. These teachers have been asking for these types of tools for years, because you never know, what type of situation we're going to find ourselves in. And COVID obviously is a pretty crazy experience that we're finding ourselves in. But all it did was speed that process up. And now it's forced these schools to move forward with basically what they were already wanting to do, but now they just were forced to do it right away, because most of these digital learning tools, Pronto included, they're not built for solely online learning environments. I mean, take Pronto, for example. Like, if you're in a physical class and you go and you learn from the professor, how much work then happens once you leave the classroom? You're put in a group project. Well, you need to probably communicate with your classmates. And if you could do it in a way where where, it feels comfortable and it feels efficient, and you don't feel like you have to share your personal information, and you don't have to, talk to your neighbors in class and get their phone numbers. If it's just, hey, I'm just already connected with everybody who I need to be connected to, then when I leave the classroom and leave the lecture, I can continue the conversation that took place in the classroom. Like the flipped classroom environment is becoming so much more prevalent today, way before COVID hit. And that's the idea of, you come into the classroom, and that's where we like take what you've learned on your own and we put it to practice. Pronto really helps that learning outside of the classroom take place, because you're able to collaborate face to face with your teacher, or through chat, or you're able to collaborate with your classmates. And so I don't know if I have the golden answer for your question. I think everybody's kind of wondering the same thing, but my gut tells me that this is the new normal forever. And I think that digital learning will only become more and more in demand as years continue, whether we're in a pandemic or not. I just think that what we've learned from COVID, like my company, for example, we never thought that we could be as efficient and effective working from home. And then all of a sudden we learned, man, providing this type of flexibility makes my employees a whole lot happier, and they're actually more effective. I think the same rings true for students. If we provide that type of flexibility for students, they're going to surprise us with how productive and successful they can be in their classes.
Yeah, that's great to know. It's just like that you don't, I guess, get the impression that like people are seeing any of these things as like a Band-Aid, or it's just like, oh, okay, well, we're just going to slap this on and just kind of, make do, and then, I don't know, go on in some other way. But because yeah, again, I mean, that's just always, I mean, my sort of gut check here is like, it really is, and sort of a willing or a proper word choice of just like, this is accelerating change that was already happening, like that really just like captures it well. But yeah, that other thing is just like, I guess reassuring too, is that like there's not going to necessarily need to be some sort of like, seismic kind of lift to kind of get everything over the hump, where it's just like, okay, guys, let's like make sure that we keep you, like we're really close and we got to like, push it over. It's like, no, I think there's momentum now. Like it'd be really hard to like take a bunch of things away or like roll a bunch back to be like, no, you got used to using this, but now we're going to take it away. Like you said, like there's so much utility for any learner at an institution, and increasingly, obviously we have like adult learners taking like some courses in person, some courses online, and, just any of this kind of, fluid modality is certainly just going to become more commonplace as well. So,
yeah, I mean, can you imagine you're a student and you've just gone through what we've gone through the past 9 months, and how crazy, let's say you were an in-classroom student where you were going to class every day, and then all of a sudden everything went remote and your teachers didn't know how to teach online. And so there was this huge like 3-4 month gap where your teacher's trying to figure it out, where you're trying to figure it out. And there's all the headaches that you had to deal with during that process. And now if all of a sudden your school, let's say you get back into class full time and your school says, okay, well, we didn't learn anything, so we're going to just go back to how we were doing it before. And if it ever happens again, we're just going to have to go through that same crazy learning curve that we went through the first time. Like that seems like madness to me. I think every school would be like, okay, we learned some really important lessons here. We never know what can happen in the world. Let's build our infrastructure of our learning environment so we can support it if something crazy like this ever happens again.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, like it just allows you to be more adaptable. Like it just can, be flexible with whatever the circumstances or the teaching modality. So, so I'm curious, I mean, just anything obviously pertinent to the conversations that we're having now, about digital engagement or anything like that, or just any other resources that you feel like have been helpful to you and your work, anything that you'd like to give a shout out to that we could include in the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, kind of the model that we really adhere to is, I don't know if you've read the book, The Lean Startup, but it's all about, in the past, people would build products sort of like from start to finish and complete the product 100% before they ever roll it out. But what Pronto has done, and meetings is a perfect example of this, is people are just begging for better tools right now, especially in learning. And so we could have, built meetings and waited until we had all of the functionality that we ultimately want to build. But I'm glad that we didn't, because we built basically, again, going back to the lean startups model of building tools. We built a very lean product that was super simple, super easy to use, and pretty basic. And then now we're taking the feedback that the schools are giving us, and we're just going to continue to enhance it and make it better. But yeah, I think that's one of the philosophies that we really try to live closely with. And then, we have some different resources on our website that you're welcome to check out at pronto.io/education. And then we're always interacting with people on our Twitter page, which is @try_Pronto. So yeah, we're always trying to take feedback from experts in digital learning and take that and apply it to our product.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have ways to connect with Pronto and all your resources and that book, just because, that definitely is something for me, like coming from a campus and now working with campuses is kind of just like a fundamental difference, I think, of just like building and creating things. I think there's definitely, I think somewhat of a paradigm shift happening at some campuses with this as well. But like, yeah, kind of just being like, let's just get version 1 out, like just so we can be there, be used, and then you like get feedback and improve it over time. Like that is such a refreshing mindset, is that, you're not kind of limiting yourself, and just the kind of mantra of like, done is better than perfect, That's been, a great reminder for myself in a lot of different ways, but kind of applies here as well. But I know you all definitely put out a lot of good content, and some great resources to check out there as well. So as we wrap up the episode, and, we always like to try to end things on an optimistic note. So just any final thoughts you have kind of looking forward, looking ahead with like digital engagement and higher education, the work that you and your team there at Pronto are doing, what kind of final thoughts that you have about kind of keeping motivated, keeping inspired, and, continuing to move things forward?
Yeah. I would say the point that I would just love to emphasize is sort of what I mentioned earlier about adding the human element to the learning environment. Just how important it is for a student's educational experience to not just be based on content. And the more, ed tech companies like us, but everybody takes that into consideration, I think the better off our students will be, the better off we'll be, and just ultimately the better experience our students will have while they're in school. I would argue that, at least in my educational experience, that learning was definitely important for me, but I would argue that the more important part for me was building connections. It was making new friends. It was hearing other people's opinions and gaining my own opinions and debating certain topics, and really just building connections with each other. And if I'm doing nothing but reading books and submitting assignments and taking tests, I'm missing out on such an important part of my educational experience. And that's where tools like Pronto really come in. And it's not just Pronto. There's a million fantastic tools out there that really add that human element into the classroom and facilitate the human side of digital learning. And so, yeah, that's, I don't know if that's a good final thought, but that's sort of what I would say is kind of the side of education that keeps us motivated here, is just knowing that we are truly impacting students and teachers' learning experience while they're in school.
Yeah, that's such a great way to end this episode. A beautiful sentiment that I agree with for sure. And certainly just that idea too of like people need to be thinking about this. Faculty and staff should be thinking about this in whatever way that it makes sense for them to do, and Pronto, I think, is absolutely like a great way to do that. But like you said, I mean, there are like a lot of great, other options out there, but I'm so grateful for you for jumping on the show and sharing all that you did. And, again, we'll have ways to connect with you and the work that you're doing there. So thanks again so much. It was really great to learn more about your journey and more about the work that Pronto is doing.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.